AFR Talk. And just lest you think that there is simply no difference between Islam and Christianity, I just want to give you a quick sampling before I dive into what I think we ought to do about Islam. By the way, the number to call if you want to share with us where you were when you heard about 9/11. I can tell you where I was, and if you'd like to tell us where you were and what your reactions were. And again, we are not against Muslims. What we are against is Islam. We are not against Muslims. We are for Muslims because we want them to be liberated from the darkness and the deception and the danger and the wickedness of Islam. We want them set free from that. We don't want anybody living in that kind of bondage and that kind of darkness. We want them to come into the light of Jesus Christ and the light of the kingdom of God. So we're not against them. We are for them. But in order to be for them, we have to be against their religion because it is their religion that is the problem. Here is a story from Yahoo News. Well, actually, this is the French press, their equivalent of the Associated Press. A rabbi was beaten brutally by 4 Muslims in front of his 6-year-old daughter because he was wearing a traditional Jewish head covering. The Arab Spring that President Obama has so proudly claimed authorship of in Egypt just shut down the last Jewish synagogue in Egypt. There is now not a single operational Jewish synagogue in Egypt because there is no freedom of religion in Islam. And that's why I've suggested for a long time that our approach to the building of mosques, I'm going to have a slightly different approach than what I say in a couple minutes, but our approach to mosques ought to be, hey, we'll let you build a mosque here for every church you let us build in Saudi Arabia. Every time we get to build a church in Saudi Arabia, you get to build a mosque here. Until then, no dice, no deal. Now, Iran is out there. You know, President Obama is frustrating the Israelis because he will not give them a clear understanding of what our response is going to be if Israel needs to attack Iran because they're nuking up. And that's driving Netanyahu and the Israelis crazy because they do not know whether they can depend on us. In fact, what President Obama has told Iran through intermediaries, don't worry, if Israel attacks, we're not going to come to their defense. We're not going to support them. We're not going to back them up. We got no beef with you. That's between you and Israel. So they made it clear that President Obama's made it clear through these back channels, Israel's completely on its own. But Iran has said, look, if Israel attacks us, we are coming after the United States. We don't care what President Obama says. We are coming after you. And speaking of Egypt and Muslims in Egypt, here is one of the leading Egyptian clerics, preachers. He explained on a recent television show that a good woman, even if beaten by her husband, puts her hand in his and says, I will not rest until you are pleased with me. This is how the Prophet Muhammad taught his women to be. Now realize, in Christianity, husbands are taught to lay down their lives for their wives and to treat them with honor as a weaker vessel. What Muhammad taught Muslims to do is if they give you trouble, beat them. Islam, this is what the preacher says, Islam instructs a man to beat his wife as a last resort before divorce so that she will mend her ways. So that, again, is one of the leading preachers in Islam in the country of Egypt. You know, and Jerry Boykin yesterday, Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin said, look, we need to seal our borders. That's one of the things that we need to do to deal with the threat of Islam. We need to seal our borders. And here's a story today from the Yucatan Times. The Yucatan Times, I kind of like saying that too. An American citizen of Arab origin, a guy by the name of Rafiq Mohammed Laboon al-Aboun, is a member of Hezbollah, and he was arrested Saturday night in a Mexican town, the town of Merida. So Hezbollah is not just over there in Lebanon and Gaza Strip making trouble. They are right there in Mexico trying to get across the border and make mischief here. Now, what should we do about the threat of Islam? I suggest 3 things that we ought to do. We need to, first of all, before we get into what we ought to do, I think we need to understand that Islam is at war with us. We are not at war with Islam, but Islam is at war with us. Not radical Islam, but mainstream Islam is at war with us because, and I'm quoting from the Quran, this is Muhammad's command. I mentioned it yesterday. Slay the idolaters wherever you find them. Arrest them, besiege them, lie in ambush everywhere for them. This is Allah's command to his devoted followers, and it has never been rescinded. It is in effect today. This is what drove the 9/11 hijackers to do what they did. Slay the idolaters wherever you find them. Lie in ambush everywhere. That's exactly what they did on 9/11. They ambushed the American infidels. Now, of course, we're not saying that all Muslims want to do this. All Muslims intend to obey this command. Of course not. But we got to understand as well, there may be moderate Muslims. There is no such thing as moderate Islam. And the reality is the more devoted, the more devout a Muslim becomes, the more of a threat he becomes to us and to our national security. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood, this is the largest and by far the most influential expression of Islam in America. Huma Abedin, who is Hillary Clinton's closest advisor, she used to be an officer in the Muslim Brotherhood. Her family produced a journal for 20 years that promoted Muslim Brotherhood ideals, and here is their goal. This is Huma Abedin's goal as a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. This is their stated goal in North America. They've written it down. It's in a memo. We don't have to guess at this. They're telling us what they intend to do. Their goal is to engage in, quote, a kind of grand jihad, listen to this, in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house so that it is eliminated and Allah's religion is made victorious over all other religions, specifically, by the way, including Christianity. So that's the goal of Islam. It's in the Quran, and it's right there in the Muslim Brotherhood memo. The goal of Islam is to destroy America. Islam is at war with America. Islam is at war with us. Now, this is a grand jihad. They're willing to do this on the stealth. They're willing to use sabotage to do it, as well as outright warfare. Now, three things that I believe that America can and should do in time. Number one, as Andy McCarthy suggested, and again, this is, I was one of the first that I remember to articulate this, but Andy McCarthy, he is a federal prosecutor. He's the guy that put the blind shake, the mastermind of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Anthony McCarthy is the guy that put him in prison. And he thinks that we ought to stop immigration from Muslim majority nations. If you got a nation that's Muslim majority, we just ought to not permit any kind of immigration into the United States from those nations. That would take out about 57 nations around the world. Now, certainly, most of the Muslim immigrants from those nations would not be out to destroy us, but we have no way to distinguish the Muslims that we have to worry about from those that we don't. And if our priority, therefore, is to protect the safety, security of the American people, protect our cultural values, then it simply makes sense. The risk to our security is simply too great. Now, secondly, I've suggested this for some time, that we should adopt a policy in which Muslims are prohibited from serving in the United States military. Now, I would suggest that it is just folly of an extraordinary magnitude to allow men to wear the uniform of the United States who have a sworn, sacred, and solemn duty to kill American infidels. This does not, to me, make any rational sense whatsoever. Now, this will prevent Muslims from serving in the military who represent no threat to our interest. I admit that. I acknowledge that. A lot of Muslims would be able to serve in the military and they would represent no threat to our interests. But they will be prevented from serving under this policy. But that is the fault of Muslims, not us. The fault there lies with the Muslims' prophet, with their holy book, with their God, and with those Muslims who take seriously the grisly commands of Allah. Again, until we've got some kind of foolproof way of detecting dangerous Muslims and distinguishing them from the rest, simple prudence dictates that this is the course of action that we ought to take. And don't forget the Muslim doctrine of taqiyya, which actually commends the practice of lying to advance the cause of Islam, means that even the oath of service that is taken by a Muslim recruit cannot be trusted. After all, Major Nadal Hassan took that oath, and yet he murdered 13 of his fellow soldiers in cold blood. Now, the third thing I believe that we can do, which would be a sound, rational, clear-headed public policy, would be to stop the practice of building mosques in America. This is what Dutch parliamentarian Geert Wilders has suggested. They're dealing with the reality of the Muslim infiltration, the Muslim invasion, and what Geert Wilders, he's dealing with this. He's been under armed guard now for about 10 years because he can't go anywhere in public without being in risk of his life being forfeited. In fact, he shared the cell. He was in the cell that the Lockerbie bomber was in, not because he was a bad guy, but for his own protection. They wanted to put him somewhere where the Muslims couldn't get at him, so they put him in a prison cell, the same one that the Lockerbie bomber was in. And Geert Wilders said, look, we just need to stop the building of mosques in America. Now, this naturally raises First Amendment issues, but I want to point to the fact of something that Associate Justice Joseph Story said in his monumental work on the Constitution. The real object of the First Amendment was not to countenance, much less to advance Mohammedanism or Judaism or infidelity by prostrating Christianity, but to exclude all rivalry among Christian sects. And he specifically points out that Congress was prohibited from picking one Christian denomination and making it the official church of the United States. That was the point of the First Amendment, to tie the hands of Congress, but the states were not restricted. And thus, he says, the whole power over the subject of religion is left exclusively to the state governments. In other words, the Constitution as given to us by the founders would permit states to prohibit the building of mosques. This is according to Joseph Story, the longest-serving Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. Back with your calls, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Back in 2.